Well, good afternoon and welcome to the tropical rainforest beach, uh, remote island in the middle of nowhere. Well, okay, you can tell by the waterline on my forehead that my lack of a $5 million budget is not going to allow me to convince you that I'm sitting on the beach in some remote island in the Pacific. But it's snowing outside and it's really windy, so the microphone was picking up endless amounts of wind noise. So I have brought it inside to the artificial environment. But hopefully, I can fool your senses for a little bit, and you can just close your eyes and imagine, or look at the screen. If you're driving, don't close your eyes, and imagine that you are sitting on a tropical beach with perfect 71-degree temperature with a gentle, warm, rolling breeze, and you're just living the good life. It's going to be kind of a coming at you hard and fast night. I've got hopefully some things that will be of benefit to those who are listening, and I want to begin this evening actually by talking briefly about our exam last week. I know it was for those of you who had the opportunity to take the exam, I know it was a little challenging, and you may have walked away feeling discouraged if you failed the test, if you got a 59% or less. And if you passed, well then congratulations. Then hopefully you feel encouraged to go on and work more diligently. But if you did fail, I want to first uh, make a couple statements, hopefully to be helpful. Number one, don't be discouraged. Failure is the great teacher. Failure is an opportunity to realize that we have room to grow, and that if we change something about the way we're preparing for that exam, and in this case, if we change something about the way that we are living our life, then you have the opportunity to improve it. And so, if you did fail, I mean, I guess kind of the takeaway is, so does that mean that I'm failing at life? And the shorter answer to that question, well, if this was the mainstream media, uh, then perhaps uh, I would just sugarcoat this and say, oh, it doesn't mean that you are failing at life. But actually, that is what it means. It means that you are failing at life. And so the best thing to do is just acknowledge that, not avoid it, but acknowledge that and just say, okay, I'm going to do better. I'm going to look at the areas that we covered, and I'm going to maybe pick one or two areas and really focus on improving in those areas, and I'm going to go on and I'm going to live a meaningful life, and uh, hopefully that also is encouraging. I know that was kind of a gut punch a little bit, but I don't know how else we learn. If everybody always gets an A, and everything is always okay and good, well then we can't ever learn anything. So hopefully, out of kindness and out of a helpful heart, then I can challenge you in a hard way that is a blessing to you. I would, if the roles were reversed, I would much rather you do that than just tell me everything is great. It's kind of like, come to church and you smell really bad and everyone acts like you don't, and then you realize later that you did smell really bad, and now you're embarrassed because no one said, the first person that saw you could have told you that, and then you could have sprayed down yourself with deodorant or something and solved the problem. So maybe it's a little bit like that, maybe not. Well, let me take a moment and pray for you. On a serious note, I want our talks on Thursday afternoon to be a blessing to you. And if you were in the camp where you realize, man, I've got to make some major life changes, I want to take a minute and just pray for you and pray that God would bless you. As you listen, we've got more challenging content tonight. It's not going to be as personal, so hopefully you'll walk away. It won't be quite so serious, but I want to pray for you, and then we'll go on. Lord, tonight I just pray for each listener. God, I pray as they, for those that had the opportunity to take the life exam, I just pray, Lord, that you would bless them, encourage them in the areas where they were strong, and give them a heart of repentance and a desire to turn away and walk in a straighter path in the areas where they need improvement. And I just pray, Lord, that you would encourage them tonight, give them a desire. If there are any who are apathetic, who maybe didn't do well but don't care. I pray that you would just prick their hearts into action and into motion. And we just pray, Lord, that you would bless your word as we read it later this evening. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, first thing I want to do is give an update on the conflict, the war. I seriously doubt that it is a special military operation at this point, and I think probably even the Russian people are beginning to realize that it is not a special operation when the Russian government announced today that they will be drafting an additional 135,000 troops to take to the front in the war with, well, the proxy war with NATO, but the direct war with the country of Ukraine. And a couple things that I want to note. The first thing that I want to say, and I am a little bit repentant about taking a pot shot at mainstream media. I am not targeting any particular people, reporters. I know that for many of them, they're just trying to do their jobs, but they have an obligation to speak the line or take the line of the corporation that owns that media station, and so that makes it difficult for there to be actual free speech. So the system's kind of rigged against them. So they'll throw out a little defense and some help for them. But one of the things, and I think it's been dispelled today, but one of the things I had in my notes to cover from this past week is that there seemed to be some kind of an optimism that there was a ceasefire or that Russian troops were pulling back or I don't know, something, and you saw the stock market recover significantly, especially if you were holding positions in the NASDAQ. I mean, you just saw a huge rally, just like, oh, never mind, the war's over, everything's going to be fine. I struggle to find any evidence to support that. Nothing from my friends on the ground would seem to suggest there's been any change. And of course, today, Russia's just escalating. So I think it was just maybe we needed mentally a break from the intensity of what is happening, and that I certainly understand because we're on week 5 now, I believe, and that is a long time for the world, but it is a dramatically long time for those that are in the war zone or who have had to flee their homes and are living as refugees in other countries. A terrible, terrible time. My heart goes out to each Ukrainian and each person who has suffered loss in whatever way that is in Ukraine. And I want to make a couple points to help us in terms of preparedness, which is not really a topic tonight, but one thing I want that I hope that we can perhaps a truth that we can each take in this afternoon is to realize that this is not going to be a short-term situation. Now, I hope it doesn't turn out to be a 20-year situation like in Afghanistan or Syria, Iraq, other wars that were long and drawn out that just seem to grind on. And I don't think I think this is a significantly higher stake, higher intensity, higher involvement from everyone on the planet war than those other wars. Not to diminish the significance of those wars in any way, especially not to diminish Vietnam or Korea or other wars where many American lives were lost, but to say that this conflict looks a lot more like a World War I style conflict where everyone in the world, every country, every nation has some kind of an interest one way or the other, whether it's oil, whether it's political, whether it's militarily, geographical, philosophical, ideological. I mean, almost everyone has a stake, a lot of economic stake, and particularly with China and the United States, Canada, France, United Kingdom. So there's just a lot in Germany also in particular, well, in Poland, a long list of countries. And so there is just a lot at stake. There's a lot of side taking. We've seen India come out and begin to defend Russia just a little bit. Of course, China continues to, semi-silently stand with their ally, the Russian Federation. So the lines are being drawn, and this is shaping up to be a very long-term event. And I think as Americans, when our president came out on national television last week and said Americans need to prepare for severe food shortages and to, take on the brunt of the cost of this war, and as he told troops, American troops in Warsaw, which is the capital in Poland, that they were going to be going into Ukraine, and then, of course, retracting it all a few hours later. I think, honestly, my take is our president was telling the truth. That is what he understands is the situation, that he does intend to, or the United States does intend to, or has to at some point, send troops in and put boots on the ground, or send planes or AI robots or something in to help the Ukrainian people. I think that probably is more on the table than what people realize. And then, in addition to that, I think the idea that there will be continued shortages for years as a result of as a result of this war. I think those are all things even though it was all retracted and taken back, I think probably we need to recognize that there was a lot of truth in those statements, and should take that at face value, and to realize that there will be American lives at stake. There will be challenges and difficulties here back home, and I'm not discouraged by that, and I don't shy away from that. If that's what I can do as an American citizen, to go without some types of food or electronics or some supply, iron or rubber or copper or basic things, that just it makes life a little bit harder here, that will ease the suffering of millions of people in Europe, will sign me up. I will get in line, and I will be ready to do my part to endure some hardship. And frankly, Americans don't endure a lot of hardship generally, comparatively to the rest of the world. And now I know, for those that are staring back through the camera at me saying, well, you don't, woe is me, you don't know my life. You're right, I don't. And I know there are many of you who are suffering greatly, or maybe not many, but some of you. I'm just saying, generally, our struggle here in the United States of America is significantly lesser than, excuse me, what many others experience. So I hope that's an attitude that I would invite you to join me in, that attitude, as we face this crisis, as we face this war situation. And my prayers and thoughts and concerns continue to be with Ukrainian people as they fight a malicious leader who has, is gearing up for a long-term war. Now, what is the evidence? I guess a fair question is, what is the evidence? What are you basing that on? Well, today's development is clear evidence that the Putin, at least, is gearing up for a long-term war. When you draft people and convert them into troops, it takes a very long time. I mean, ask anyone who's been in any branch of the armed forces, or in law enforcement, or in any kind of tactically a career where there is going to be tactical training and survival training. It takes a long time to learn those skills and to develop those skills, and then to put them in to combat, to further develop those skills. So it takes months and years for that to take place. So it's not like you can just call up a bunch of people and they're automatically going to be battle ready tomorrow. I mean, you've got to equip them, you've got to transport them. I mean, there are so many logistics involved in, especially in a draft like this, where you're just drafting average citizens, which is my understanding. I just looking at from the article, it doesn't sound like these are specialized military mercenary kind of people. That these are just everyday Joes that are going to be trained to go out and fight in a war. So that he is planning on years of war, and perhaps his thought process is, well, we'll start, just like with Hitler, we'll start in Ukraine. Hitler started in Poland, and then I'm going to move, till I get, the Russian Federation to, restore the glory of the old Soviet Union, and then maybe we'll stop. Or until we make him stop, until we, NATO, United States, those that have a military deterrence, until we determine that we will stop him. Now, the biggest struggle, from what I understand, without getting into a long discussion on this topic, is that our nuclear abilities are not are less modern than the Russian Federation's. I mentioned several videos ago, I've been spending quite a bit of time trying to educate myself a little bit about our military and nuclear readiness. And one of the things that I understand is that beginning in 1990, after the Reagan years, we stopped developing our tactical nuclear weapons. We took a more defensive posture in terms of nuclear deterrence, rather than a more aggressive posture that Russia took in modernizing their nuclear weapons, creating a larger fleet of intercontinental ballistic missiles and other missiles that are more offensive rather than defensive. And so that really does put, in fact, I think possibly, this is speculation, that part of our hesitance to enter the war is that we're not sure that we could win or even fight a fairly decent nuclear war against Russia. That they just have hypersonic nuclear missiles. Their nuclear submarines, for example, carry mostly long-range nuclear missiles, to where our submarines are more for anti-Soviet era nuclear missile submarines. So we only have mid-range ballistic missiles. And so we're just not prepared, at least at the point that this conflict began, we were not prepared to fight a nuclear war against the Russian Federation. And perhaps they have been planning this for a long time, and that's why they have been preparing. And we have a lot of people that have been openly speaking out against, having nuclear weapons. And, I have to agree with Ronald Reagan and some of the other presidents that believe that, some of the best way to keep the peace is to be the biggest dog on the porch. And so you create so much military might that you keep the peace just by the fact that you're mighty, and the fact that we have demonstrated some weakness in some areas now may suggest why our adversaries are rising up against us. So just some comments. I think most of that's pretty apparent if you watch the news. I know a lot of you are not interested in the news, which I completely understand, because finding the truth sometimes anywhere, whether it's YouTube, whether it's mainstream media, whether it's telegraphing documents, it's difficult, and it's like finding a needle in the haystack sometimes. So that is the situation as I see it. If you see it differently, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and let me know in the comment section below, or send me a message. Curious for what you're thinking, what your research and information that you have sought out is leading you to conclude. And so let me know that. I think it'd be great to just kind of have a little discussion about that. All right, and then the last comment that I want to make before we jump into the main part, which really, I guess we're into it already, because tonight one of the themes that I want to address is how our culture, we as and I won't involve every NATO country in the statement, but we'll just talk about United States of America. We have come to kind of a new level of softness in our ability to endure hardship, decadence in terms of what we expect and from life in general, selfishness in terms of how we place ourselves in the way that we serve people within the world and within our nation. And so that's kind of the topic that we're looking at tonight. And one of the largest evidences for that is the situation. And yes, you thought probably you were going to watch a YouTube video that did not in some way reference the slapping or the punching or the violence that occurred at the Oscars, but in fact we are going to mention it, because I think it puts our fingers on the pulse of what's really happening in the United States. That we would have, a person, I'm not going to say anyone's names, but I think everyone knows the situation I'm referring to, but an individual at the Oscars got mad at another individual and walked up to him, slugged him, walked off, yelled some cuss words at him in front of millions of people, and just handled their frustration and disagreement with violence and with foolishness, what I would assign foolishness, rather than working out the problem. And in fact, there's really two sides of that situation. I'm not even sure there's a clear right or wrong. So rather than harp on someone or give someone a hard time, or rant about who should have done what or get into the drama, what I want to do is just take a little bit more of a macro view of the situation, and look at the response of people who have been a part of and watched that situation go on. That should have been kind of a not newsworthy, people kind of ashamed to discuss what happened, ashamed that this kind of thing happened in America. No one would should be social media posting about it because of the not wanting to give it light or give it, attention. And yet it has become like the biggest news story of the week. I mean, it's like the war quit existing and supply shortages quit existing and the economic inflationary problems and gas prices and everything else, just like it's like it all stopped and no one cares about it anymore, and they just want to talk about the drama that happened at the Oscars. And well, I'm not condemning the Oscars. I'm not condemning anyone, but the fact that our attention is so focused on such an event in the way that it is, I think demonstrates a pettiness and a loss of focus in a nation. And what's fascinating to me about that is that we find in the New Testament in 2 Timothy chapter 3 that a description of this scenario. In fact, we're going to read this tonight, and as we read it, I think that, like me, you will find that this chapter talks directly to a nation who ends up dealing with situations like this in the way that we are dealing with it and handling it. And uh, I I'm alarmed, not surprised necessarily, but alarmed that we have arrived at such a place. And do we, if we do not change how we are as a nation, then we are going to, our day, our day of might and national supremacy as kind of the world's peacekeepers and the world's makers and shakers is going to come to an end. And like many other empires before us, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, they will diminish substantially or disappear altogether because we did not have the inner strength that is required for freedom. In fact, a great quote that I think is very applicable here is that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, that we can never let down our guard, get to a place of comfort and decadent living where we've lost our ability to stand up for what's right, stand up for the weak, and those that are downtrodden, and be strong in the face of bullies and enemies, and deal with them appropriately and not just take an isolationist, kind of a, well, that's happening over there, not going to worry about it mentality, which of course always leads to world wars because then the bullies start picking off all the weak, and then finally after the damage is done, we go in and do something. Made that mistake in World War One, made that mistake in World War II. I hope that we do not make that same mistake this time around. So let's begin to look at this. If you would, if you have a Bible, if you would turn to 2 Timothy chapter 3 and read this with me. I think in light of everything that has happened, particularly today, or I guess in the last couple of days, it is very illuminating for us to examine this situation, which the Bible is talking about the last days and what it depicts will happen in the last days. Now, I want to be extremely clear when we talk about the last days. I in no way am a prophet or am making a prophecy or suggesting in any way that these are the last days. I'm not suggesting that they are in fact not the last days. I am just drawing a comparison between what's described here and what is in the last days. And in fact, frankly, I think there is a lot more to happen. I think God has a lot more to do upon the earth. So I personally think we have quite some way to go before we get to that place. But what I do think is could extremely be likely the case that it is the last days of the American Republic. That I do think our culture draws nigh towards the end of its life if we continue on the path that we are on. So let's examine this, and then you let me know in the comments what you think, if you feel like this applies or not to our situation. Verse 1. But know this, difficult times will come in the last days, for people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, slanders, without self control, brutal, without love for what is good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of godliness but denying its power. In other words, kind of being hypocrites, claiming to be a quote unquote Christian nation and yet acting directly in contrast to that statement. Avoid these people. That's how verse 5 ends. So let's just take a moment. That was quite a list. And in fact, as I take a survey of the scriptures, I believe, with the exceptions of when the law is being given, all right, and some biblical scholars out there correct me, post a comment if this is not correct, but I believe this is the longest laundry list of misdeeds that we find in the scriptures. And I want us to take just a moment and understand, because some of these things, they just kind of fly at you like punches, and then you move on and you're a little dazed and confused as to what just happened. So let's take just a few minutes and examine these statements, and let's begin to ask ourselves, do we see these elements in our culture? All right, so I'm kind of moving from a national designation, and I'm going to talk more now about our culture, kind of our Western culture in general. All right, so let's begin with the first few statements. Lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, proud, and blasphemous. All right, so these statements seem to suggest an attitude of selfishness, so that we care about ourselves, our comforts, what's best for us rather than what's best for everyone in the situation. And then when we talk specifically about loving something, it means that we are investing our life into that goal, that end game of being a lover of ourself, our selfishness, compared to others. Now, I'm going to list some examples. I think that I'm attacking myself in all of these examples. So please do not take offense to any of these things. And I am not against wealth or riches or rich people at all. In fact, I believe that is part of the American dream, is the ability to work hard and and earn your way into a way of life that is that has prosperity. I think there is no requirement to take a vow of poverty or to give away 100% of your wealth and live on the street. I do think that is a ministry and a calling for some, and that there I can think of some great men and women who have been self-sacrificing and given in that way, and I think that is admirable, and I strive to be more like that myself. But by no means do I believe that is everyone's calling, because God uses the wealth of many to bless those who are without. And so, but so just that's kind of a caveat, a disclaimer when I make these statements. But I want you to think about East versus West. All right. Think about, just imagine if you lived in the East. Okay. Imagine if you were Russian or you were Arabic in some way, and you lived in a place where 90% of all the money you make goes just to buy food and just to survive. So the idea of having an Oral-B toothbrush that's just not even that's just not going to happen, because that is a luxury item, and we might feel like that's a need, but that's a luxury item because you can live without that. Now your teeth are going to not do as well over a lifetime without a toothbrush, but when you're just trying to have food to eat, and then you're not as concerned about having a toothbrush, for example. But if you look at, so imagine you're on the other side of the fence and you're over there and you're looking at all of our big houses and our elaborate vacations that everybody posts pictures about, and all the elaborate amenities that we have in our homes, washers and dryers and ice machines and indoor plumbing and air conditioning and heating, and now there's Alexa, and she turns around and looks at you and talks to you all throughout your house, and I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty awesome to have the opportunity at least to earn a wage that you can purchase these things. I mean, that is amazing, because in many places, especially in the Eastern Hemisphere, that possibility does not exist. And so imagine that you're just tired. you are just tired of people in the West feeling like they're better than everyone else, feeling like they deserve all the good stuff while you're slaving away in a factory for 50 cents an hour making things, okay? Because remember, we don't pretty much, we don't make anything here in the United States. Most everything's made in other places, particularly in China. And so imagine you're slaving away making all this stuff, and we're giving them a few pennies for the stuff that they make, and they are just, working 16-hour days to give us all of, and then we get on national television and have drama and act like snowflakes, and we just can't handle any amount of adversity, and every little thing offends everybody else, and we just we're just fall apart at the slightest bit of stress. We act like we have a stressful life when the reality is almost no one truly has a stressful life. They've imposed pressure on themselves. It's unreasonable, which is a whole nother rant and thing for another time. But just imagine that you're on the other side of this fence and you see that, and for those few that have Bibles that could read or would read and understand this, that you would say yes. I would. I think I would look on the other side of the fence and say yes. Americans are boastful and lovers of self, and they're lovers of money, and they're ungrateful, and they're disobedient to parents. I mean, good grief. When I was a kid, oh, here we go with the when I was a kid. But when I was a kid, TV shows rarely depicted children disrespecting their parents on them, because that was just not appropriate. I mean, that's just not helpful to the child to teach them to act like an idiot towards the parents. And now half the shows on TV, you've got some, you know, it makes it, you have the show that kind of creates an environment where the child is wise and knows everything, and parents are dumb and they don't know anything, and they demean parents and are disrespectful to them. And that's just the way of the West. And it's very disappointing, because children have an opportunity while they're living at home to learn and to grow into becoming adults. And if they miss out on that process, if our culture poo-poos on that process, then they're never going to become adults themselves, and they just stay children forever. And we can probably all point to people in our lives who are 40 years old and act like children. Hopefully you're not saying that to me, but I'm sure there are some childish things that I have said and done. In fact, I know that there are not, there might be, I know there are some things that I have done doing that are childish and foolish. It is perplexing, and I could understand why, looking from the other side of the fence over, that these things might be seen. All right, let's move on. Slanderers, without self-control, brutal, without love for what is good. All right, so these are moral statements here. This next list, these are moral concerns and issues, things that Americans have taken on. And I'm gonna, the algorithm's are probably already punishing me, but so I'm not going to get into a lot of specific things, but we have a very serious problem with morality in the West. That once we held a high standard for honesty, integrity, purity, decency, modesty, and we have thrown all of that away in favor of terrible violence, immoral behavior, openly performed on screen and now in virtual reality. And it is a terrible tragedy as to what is occurring in the world. And I want to say, just as a side note, hopefully you have cut the cord, so to speak, and you have gotten rid of media in your life that takes away your choice. We, and you guys are going to raise your eyebrows, I'm sure, but we ended cable/satellite in our family in 2003. So 17, 18, that's 19 years ago. And the reason that we did that is that when you subject yourself to a television where you do not know what's coming, and you're just at the mercy of what's on, when you have, let's say from 7:30 to 9 at night to watch, and so you just turn it on, and then, I mean, you are in essence just brainwashing yourself, that you are choosing to be programmed. That is why I love the beauty of streaming, because you get to choose what you expose yourself to. Now, you may still choose poorly, and there may be surprising elements in what you choose, but you are making that choice and you're not at the mercy of what's being shown. So if you've not made that decision, I want to challenge you, encourage you to do that. And I know that there's like, I know TiVo's not probably around anymore, but there's ways to record and, so I don't want to get in the minutia of that, and I don't want to, make everybody mad who still has cable or satellite. I just want to suggest to you, perhaps even if you have those services, you have some reason why you feel like you need that, even though you can stream literally everything. That just don't subject yourself to that. Be intentional about how you program your mind. All right, but generally, I mean, just looking at the West, I mean, we tend to have an extremely immoral lifestyle, and I'm not advocating for you know Eastern religions where women just are abused and have no rights and have to cover themselves in a an unreasonable manner. I'm not advocating for that. I do think probably all of us need to cover ourselves in an appropriate manner. So we probably aren't a good example of that either. But that we are by no means the leaders of morality anymore in the West, and that we need to take a good hard look at that and to begin to examine why we lack integrity as a nation and as individuals in that nation, why we feel so ready to participate in sexual immorality, participate in dishonesty, in cheating, in different things, and why we, for example, and this is not, I'm not talking about public education, private education, homeschool. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about learning in general. Okay, so wherever you're at, there seems to be more emphasis on getting a certain grade or degree than actually learning. And if I could, in one sentence, solve what is wrong with the programming of young American minds, that probably is it right there. That we have created this testing, and I'm not against tests, so I think have their place, but we put more emphasis on getting a degree, and I'm attacking myself because I have a lot of degrees. Uh, we've been more focused on that than learning important things. We graduate children from high school and college who have no idea how to manage their finances. They have no idea about history and what has occurred in this nation from the landing of the colonists to the American Civil War to World Wars to Vietnam to any of that. They have no idea about most of those things. They can't cook for themselves. They can't hold a job. They have no respect for authority. Well, okay, I'm making too hard of statements. Many times have lacked proper respect for authority. Let me say it in a more balanced and more positive way. And so that is really a travesty, and would seem to suggest that there is a fundamental problem, and I think that is what it is ultimately there. And so it's not really the education system, and it's not homeschool or private school or any of those things. It's just that general idea that we're kind of missing. Where I mean, to me, it's just cheating. Like you can't. Why? How could getting a diploma or having some kind of a credential, if you don't have the knowledge to back that up, it seems meaningless to me. So I think that whole thing just needs to be probably thrown away and start over. But I'm not. I'm getting too old, and no one listens to me really anyway to lead any kind of rebellion in that or revolution in that. So I will just posit my thoughts, and hopefully they will be helpful to you in some way. So let's continue and look at this next list. Traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to the form of godliness but denying its power. So we're dealing with the subject of hypocrisy, and certainly that again is an area where we struggle. That we want to think of ourselves in one way as being majestic. We're leaders. We're strong. We have these ideas and notions about ourselves, but then when we look at ourselves in an unbiased way, we actually lack those qualities because leaders are often the chief servants. Those are the people that work the hardest, and rather than the people that just kind of bully or lord it over others and without earning or earning the respect to be in that place. So again, that kind of leads to that cheating thing. And so, we do seem to have this say one thing, do another. And we see that in our commercials, right? I mean, most products, you see a commercial, it over promises and under delivers, right? And you see a picture of a cheeseburger on the menu, and then the cheeseburger that you receive, they're not the same. You see a picture of, some shiny electronic device or shiny pair of shoes, and then you get that in the mail, and it's like, okay, are you sure this does not look like the picture? And they're not comfortable, or this doesn't work, or the battery life is terrible, or we seem to overpromise and underdeliver. And in contrast, the Bible, I believe, calls us to underpromise and overdeliver, to give more than what we have committed to give, to be more generous than even what we have said that we are or intend to be. So there is a direct contrast to what we are called or commanded to do, or what a moral society is, than what we have become in the United States. Now, we're 40 minutes into this video, and you're probably thinking, wow, this guy is just kind of, he's just kind of letting it all fly, letting the punches fly tonight. And before you rage quit this video, let me just say, it's not an attack on anybody in particular. I'm just trying to just say, hey, I think we may have a problem. It's kind of like, if you start to have symptoms of a heart attack and you just keep ignoring that and ignoring that, eventually you're going to die. And the best thing to do is to get into to see a doctor, to figure out what you need to do to either have surgery and solve the blockages, or change your lifestyle so that you are healthy, that you as an organism are healthy, and can continue to live life. So I think what I'm saying is like, hey, this is kind of hey, I think the building's on fire. Let's put out the fire, instead of just watch the world burn. And honestly, that is the stance of many Americans and even many Christians, that we're just sitting here watching the world burn rather than grabbing a water bucket and going and being a part of the problem. I mean, when a town, back in the old days before fire departments, when a building was on fire, everyone in the town stopped everything they're doing, grabbed a water bucket, and they formed a line, and they started passing those buckets down and pouring water on the building. And that was how they put fires out. And that we've lost that sense of working together to solve the problem, to help people, and we need to recapture it. So the point of this drawing, that looking at this scripture and drawing the contrast, is not to discourage us and to get us down and to make us feel bad about ourselves, but the goal is to illuminate where the problem is so that we can solve it. So the solution would be, just going back and looking now, for us to become people who are unselfish, who use money to bless and love others rather than are lovers of that money. Instead of being arrogant, we are humble, and we place ourselves in a more humble stance rather than an arrogant stance. We are respectful to our parents, which ultimately means we are respectful to authority in general. That's where we tend to struggle. We're kind of anti-authority, started in the 1960s. We, rather than living in an immoral lifestyle where we're just out of control and we just rage on everything and bully everyone and hate everyone on social media and just rage quit playing Fortnite when we lose our shield, then we ought to be people who are kind and generous and slow to anger. We're slow to being provoked. We are able to take an offense and to deal with, instead of just slugging it out, punching somebody when they make us mad, that we just use our words, use our arguments, our intellect to be able to work out those differences. And of course, that's the problem we have with the Russian Federation right now. We rather than talk about it and try to work out, how Russia feels that NATO is encroaching on them, and vice versa, rather than work out a way to communicate and create a situation that's best for both peoples, we're just punching each other, and it's actually well beyond punching. And a lot of people are being killed and are going to be suffering for the rest of their lives from injuries that they have, injuries and loss that they've experienced in the war on both sides. No one ever wins in war. And I'm not anti-war because I think there is a place for war, especially when the rights of the weak are being violated. Then there is a place for war. So don't hear me saying anti-war. I'm just saying that violence always has consequences, and we have gotten ourselves in a situation where violence is just getting started. So we have a heart problem. And if you were trying to kind of figure out what the tie-in is from the picture and the cover picture in the video, that is the issue, that we have a heart problem here in America, and we need a heart surgery. I have a really good friend of mine. His name is Gary. Love him a lot. He has some blockages. He's going to have open heart surgery, and he's going to get himself better. And we're going to continue to pray for him, and I would invite you to join me praying for him and for his family. But we all need a little bit of some open heart surgery tonight. We need to get some of the junk that's inside out, and we need to get ourselves clean and right. And you might be the only person where you work, or you might be the only person where you go to school that's going to stand up and do what's right. And you know what? If that's the case, do it. Be the only person. Be that one person who is going to stand up for what's right and who's going to handle the situation, whatever it is, in the right way. Sometimes we feel like we got to wait till everyone's on our side, or we have the majority on our side to do the right thing, and that's just not true. That God has called us to stand up and do what's right at all times, and whether it's popular and easy, or if it's difficult and unpopular, that we're called to do the right thing. So I know we're getting the night, or the afternoon's getting on. We're going to wrap this up in just a little bit, but I want to read just a little bit of the next few verses, because I think it continues to give us an understanding of this heart issue that we're having, and what it looks like and how we can recover from it. It says, going on in verse 6, "For among them there are those who worm their way into households and capture idle women burdened down with sins, led along by a variety of passions, always learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth." And isn't that fascinating? Let's just camp on that statement right there. Always learning. I mean, there's so much learning, quote unquote, going on in the West. We're one of the most educated cultures ever in the history of the world. And yet, so little understanding or knowledge of the truth has come. I mean, isn't that just a tragedy, kind of an ironic tragedy that is the case? Just as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so these also resist the truth. Men who are corrupt in mind, worthless in regard to the faith, but they will not make further progress, for their lack of understanding will be clear to all, as theirs was also. So I think this illustration of what it looks like at the end times, I mean, tragically, whether it is the end times or not, in terms of just the whole earth, it is a symptom of what happens when a culture becomes decadent and selfish and immoral. And I understand, it feels overwhelming. It seems like when if you have been persuaded, or if you are of this worldview as well, it can seem overwhelming to where you just say, you know what, forget it. I'm just going to move out to the other side of Sparta and buy a farm and manage a farm and just leave the world and just forget it, because it's beyond hope. Well, I did move to the other side of Sparta and buy a farm, but I still leave that farm every day, and I go and try to help a lost and broken world. And it is first of all, it is never too late. There have been many times in history, in the nation of Israel, the nation of Nineveh, or the city-state, I guess, of Nineveh, the Egyptians, many different cultures throughout time, even the Europeans, throughout different places in history, where a time of change has come, where God has called us to repentance, which means turning away from your sin, from your decadence and selfishness, and embracing the truths of God, letting the knowledge become truth. And when that has happened historically, those nations have gone from the brink of disaster, the brink of, in our case, the brink of nuclear annihilation or terrorism, at least in the world, to a time of prosperity and peace and goodness. And so it is never too late. That it absolutely could happen right now. I mean, we see in Second Chronicles, the famous verse, if my people who will call on me and will repent of their sin, and I will hear them. God is faithful to hear us, and our cries do not fall on deaf ears, but they have to go beyond just cries. That we have to we call on the name of the Lord through our acts of faith, through our obedience, through our works. As much as Christians don't like to talk about works sometimes, works are evidence of repentance. So if there's no works, there's no repentance, and that there needs to be fruit in our lives, or that's kind of a churchy word for those of you that are not churchy people. That just basically means, because a plant bears fruit, that's how you know it's a healthy plant. So that's where that notion comes from. There needs to be some evidence of health there, that the plant is doing what it was created to do, that you as a human being are doing what God created you to do. And so I hope tonight we will kind of look at what's been, a little bit of a punch in the face, and we're getting into that part of the season of Porch Talks to where, the gloves come off and it starts to get real, and there's real challenges, and there's real, like, hey, here's where it is. This isn't just a, smiley, happy face video and make you feel good and just forget about all your problems and, just go drink some beer or vodka, or, well, you can't drink vodka now because a lot of people won't sell it, but tequila or whatever, and just drink it all away and, get a little, few hours of escape from it till you wake up in the morning with a terrible hangover and you still have all the problems that you had. So this is your time, to get in there, get down and dirty, and to deal with these things. Look at these, the opportunities that you have to make a difference and to stand up and be counted for what's good and wholesome. Because the phoenix really does rise from the ashes, and that once all those things in our life are burned away, then what's left is what's good. When the fat is trimmed, then what's left is powerful, and without the encumbrance and the weight of that baggage, we are able to do great things. You think about 5 people in your life that you admire and respect. They might be famous people that you don't know, maybe you do know, or they could just be people, a parent, an uncle, an older man or woman at church, just somebody that you just really respect, that you would just say, man, that person has made a difference in the world. Well, you know what? You can be that person as well. There is no reason why you can't be. And all it takes is a decision. It takes a decision. You have to decide that that's how it's going to be. So that's the challenge tonight, and I hope that it is communicated in a way that it's a rebuke and love, that it's a way of encouraging you with a high standard, with a big challenge, with a lot of struggling with it and wrestling with it, to do better, and to take the results of your exam last week and to just take that test and throw it away and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go up a whole letter grade next year. By this time next year, my C- is going to be a B-, and I'm going to make a difference. And even if no one else sees it, I know that God sees it. And to remember that at the end of the day, it's not what the world thinks about you, but it's what God thinks about you, and it's about who you really are in your heart. Because from the heart is what shapes the world. So hopefully that is helpful to you and challenging and encouraging to you. Please continue to pray for the needs that we shared. And give, if you're a married person, give your spouse a hug. If you're a parent or a grandparent, give your grandkids a hug. Let the people in your life know you care about them. Go make a difference. Go be who God's called you to be. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week. We'll see you next Thursday.